New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
BRZ right here.
And this is New Thought Today. We come to you every Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Mountain Time to take a look at the future vision of the New Thought philosophy and where it may be going in the world and in consciousness and in the universe from a various multi-spectrum perspective. How's that sound, Z?
Yes. That sounds like it's right on time.
All right. And this week, our topic is this thing called spiritual mind treatment. Now, it's no secret that we're both ordained ministers, the Centers for Spiritual Living, and yada, 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 all that entails. And if in our culture, it's been said if there is only one gift that the science of mind has given to humanity, it is spiritual mind treatment. And it is this very codified version of an affirmative prayer. And so our objective today, folks, is not to teach you what that is, what a spiritual mind treatment is. Sorry if everything we've said so far is absolutely Greek and you have no idea what we're saying, then I apologize, but we're not going to sit here and teach you the 5 or 6 or 7 or 3 steps of a good spiritual mind treatment. That's not the objective today. Our objective is to look at where this expression of prayer fits on a grander experience of prayer, because the last thing we want to do is come from a place of saying, well, this is it. This is the way. This is the one thing. All other prayer just leads to this point. And no, because other forms of prayer, as we've been discovering in our exploration of this topic, are very, very effective. So we're going to get to that effectiveness in a little bit. First off, Z, share with me a little bit from your perspective. Where does spiritual mind treatment, this affirmative prayer concept, fit amongst the vast array or the vast spectrum that is prayer?
Yeah, well, from my experience and practice, actually, when we talk about life itself, it's always on the spectrum. And so I think that would behoove us in anything we do, because life is in a spectrum. We have different tools and methods and ways of doing things as that continuum keeps moving. And so when we look at prayer, the types of prayer move from everything from music, right, which could be song, or it could be drumming, or it moves hymns. From there, maybe hymns, any type of apparatus, if you will, that creates a vibration, right? Because the essence of all of this is an energetic vibrational pattern that awakens something within inside of us. And then you can move from that to dance or movement, which, how many times have you heard somebody that's a runner said, man, I had the most spiritual high and I was tapped in so deeply while I was running this half marathon or whatever. And so then you move up into prayers of adoration, and then you intercession, petition, and oftentimes we as humans always do. Sometimes do. I won't say always. I'll take that back. We have this thing of superiority where we want to be better or more than someone else, and we put other methods down. Right. But that's not the case. All of these work if we use them in their proper perspective. And what affirmative prayer does, what we use in religious science / science of mind, we use a method of prayer that allows us to tap into the allness that there is, and to again channel that through us. And then once we've done that, we give thanks, gratitude, and grace for having that opportunity to do that.
Yes. And so you will hear me personally say, and many New Thought practitioners, ministers, prayer people say that affirmative prayer is not a begging or beseeching prayer. And that is true. Mm-hmm. We want to be clear. That's not to belittle or put down those forms of prayer.
Right.
They occupy a space that is really, really necessary for so many in their lives at one time or another, and in one time or another. Right. I'm reminded that one of the perspectives we like to take on this program is from that integral perspective, and that perspective along the spiral of evolution that says we have to, even though we're evolving and transcending into something new, we have to be willing to reach back and offer the hand of support to those that have not yet quite awakened to the consciousness, the perspective, the environment, the experience of prayer that we may have.
And you know that whole idea of evolution, at its core says anything that evolved from A to B contains A, right? I mean, you can't, whatever it gets evolved into contains what it evolved from. Now it may have done a little expansion or whatever, but it is the genesis of the later presentation of the evolution. So you never get away from it.
Right. We have to have the experience of surrendering into it to have the experience of the demonstration of it. We have to be willing to believe that it can happen in order for it to happen. Otherwise, our belief that it can't happen will make sure that it doesn't happen.
And you know, if it just kind of came to me here, if I had to come up with 3 categories of prayer, that each one of those could be broken down to a myriad of different things, I would say there is an affirmative prayer, there's a meditative prayer, and there's a contemplative prayer. And within those broad categories, there are various different methods of activating that type of prayer within our lives that people use different tools, we use different methods to activate that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And we evolve in through and back and forth and into all these various forms and experiences at different times in our lives. It strikes me that I've never gotten to a point where I was down on my hands and knees saying, "Please, Jesus, save me." But I have been at a place where I have been to that threshold of, okay, damn it, okay, God, let's get this. I want to see this proof. I want to see this. I want to see something here that reminds me of that this stuff is true, is working, is real.
And you know, you remind me of a story that not Bruce Lipton. What's Bruce Lipton's counterpart? He works for Bruce Lipton. I'll think of his name.
Yeah,
he was a scientist, and still is. Still around.
If I say the wrong one, it's gonna blow. You know, we're never gonna get there.
But he talks about this whole idea of, he lives down in Taos, New Mexico, and he went with one of his indigenous friends that lived down there. They were having a drought, and true story, according to him, where he goes out and the guy's gonna go pray for rain. And he's expecting to go out and see some Native American rain dance or whatever. And he said they go out, in the desert or whatever, wherever the place is that's sacred for them. And the guy, takes a moment, he centers himself, he gives recognition to the 4 directions, which a lot of Native traditions do. And he silently meditates there for a few minutes, and he said, "Okay, let's go." And he was just like, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "I'm done. This prayer is done." And he said that night, rain came.
Right. Yes. And he didn't pray for rain, as I remember
Right,
that story,
right,
right? He doesn't pray
right.
for rain. He just prays to no rain. And
Yeah,
that is what we are each being called. That is truly the essence of an affirmative prayer. We pray to know truth. We pray to know the vision. Again, not a and not the it's not a it's not a prayer of separation, that the vision somehow out there is separate from me, and I need divine wisdom and guidance to bring that truth into me. It's a
right.
recognition that it already lives within me.
Yeah. And that's where, we have to, again, and that's why part of the reason I love religious science so much. These are things that we have to go and work in the laboratory or the lab. We cannot take for granted how this stuff works. We have to go and prove it to ourselves. And then on top of that, we have to be willing to sharpen our skills, because eventually we may lose I don't know, you may lose contact with it. And that's what we, every football season is going to start here, and right now they've been practicing sharpening it, although some of them have been playing this sport the better part of their lives. But to be effective, they have to practice.
And I do not believe that the milk crate challenge is effective practice, but
Oh my God.
that might be another story.
Yeah, that's the whole other stuff.
my feed is filled with my feed is filled with stories of the football player that was caught doing the challenge, the milk crate challenge. So,
did they have one? Oh my goodness, I didn't see that.
Yeah, there's a pro that got caught coming down off the tower. He had already, the video starts with him descending from the top. So they don't actually show him going up on the milk crate challenge, but they get a video. Somebody's got a video of him coming down. I would imagine he and his coach and his athletic trainer, maybe his agent, are having a meeting sometime today or yesterday, maybe even to discuss this. I'm sure it's not in his contract.
No doubt.
Get away with that. All right, I digress. So, however, that is a demonstration, right? You look at that thing, that this milk crate challenge, if you're not familiar with it, folks, it's a crazy balancing act, and it's dangerous, and it's hurting a lot of people, and we're not promoting it. And it is the power of belief. It is the power of belief to go in there and say, I have the skills and the balance and the talent to do this, or you walk into something, or you get into the middle of something like that, and the belief is what gets you off balance.
And it's not very dissimilar, I would suggest, than firewalking.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's the same kind of concept, but what I believe they're pulling on is this meditative form of prayer, if you will, where they attach themselves to a feeling and energy that says, if I can step into this space, things happen.
Right.
By law, not by any magic of me, but by law.
Right. And that's the point, I think, so important. How do you individually step into that space?
Yes.
Right. Now, we want to hear from you, folks. So whether you're watching here live with us or you're watching on a replay at another time, more convenient for you, we applaud you there. Welcome, welcome. Reach out to us, connect with us. Minister Talk at ntmedia.org is a great place. Drop us an email there. We'll be sure to respond to you. Or you're welcome to comment in the video, on this video, at any time. And it may take us a little longer, but we'll get back around to you and say hello and connect and answer your questions. So this is New Thought Today. It happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Please do share with your friends. So now we're right back to that point, Z, right, where it becomes a matter of building my own belief in myself, in my, it isn't necessarily my ability as it is my willingness to allow, right? To be in that meditative state, to be in that prayerful state, to be in that place of consciousness that we're allowing for something greater, not just my own human limitations to control the day.
Yeah, and that's key, because for that to happen, as we were talking earlier, there has to be this level of openness and surrender, right? Because often, especially if we're from certain religious training or backgrounds, there's this whole idea, well, if I open myself up, I don't know what spirit's going to come into me, so to speak, right? But I would submit that if you are in the right frame of reverence and you are participating in a total atmosphere of grace, when the Spirit of God is moving through your life.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that to say that there's a devil moving through your life. I'm just saying that that if you do not use the tools properly, you don't get the proper results.
Right. You're bringing forward for me an analogy that I just can't get away from, and it is music. Right? That's part of how this whole network came to be, folks. Is New Thought Radio became bigger and recognized there was something more. And yet it comes back to creating an environment, an energetic, vibrational environment that supports our practice and our belief in all of this. And for me, it's always been music, and that's always been one of the great reminders and motivators. And I watched a program on Netflix called Count Me In. Now, I can't tell exactly when this was created. It doesn't escape me that they pumped it up to the top of my suggested feed the week that Charlie Watts made his transition. But it's a great program on drummers, and many of them pay homage to Charlie in this. I think it was recorded. I know it was recorded before his death, and but the point I'm coming to, and that they come to, is there is that moment of convergence that whether it's one musician or 1,000, you can find that, you can come to that moment of convergence where it is all just one. Where everybody taps into the same beat, where everybody hears the same rhythm, where everybody's following the same time. And that becomes a spiritual experience. That becomes a prayer.
Yes.
And many artists have said that a prayer, a song sung is a prayer twice prayed. Right.
And because it starts activating more, it starts, we have this idea in education that says, if you read something, you learn a certain percentage, and I don't know them. I could probably get them and get them back to you. But if you read something, if you enact something, if you both read and enact, you begin to get more and more memory and effect of that education or learning process. And that's what we're doing when we're dancing or singing. And I remembered the author's name that I was speaking of is Greg Braden. And he has a book called The Secret Mode of Lost Prayer, which is a good one. But I think even a deeper one is a book by that Bruce Lipton, who was a part of the original stem cell project. He has a book called The Biology of Belief.
Yes.
That talks about this whole thing about how belief activates something in our body at the cellular level and allows us to step into these spaces and places that that give us opportunity to step into some serious prayer application, if you will.
Yep. Now, that was a breakthrough book for me. Personally, I was in my earlier studies of science of mind and in my earlier explorations of proving these principles for myself. And that was around that time that book was originally published. So it was topical. It was like, ooh, what, it was highly recommended
Mm-hmm.
in our bookstore at that time. And I have
Yeah.
a hard copy cover of it and loved it because to me it was an even greater justification from a more scientific point of view of what I was learning from a spiritual perspective, from a spiritual tradition. So it validated for me what I was learning in a New Thought community,
Yeah.
and specifically around the power of spiritual mind treatment.
And
Because,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, because it's real easy to come into a treatment and say, yeah, this shit barely works, and get the results and get the proof that it doesn't work for us.
Right. Right.
It takes more practice to see the results and document those results and be able to point to those demonstrations.
Right. And let's be clear, because we were talking about this before. Prayer is not some competition of measure, right?
Right.
We talked in the beginning. Bridge brought to my mind this whole idea that when we first start or get in touch with this kind of thinking, this kind of uh, prayer, and this kind of communicating with the divine, we start, parking places, palaces. I forget the little catchphrase, but in essence, it says we begin to test this stuff on material things that we can physically see or recognize as a result of what we've been doing. And that's fine because that's how we do everything, right? We learn to talk, we use the word. We don't quite know when we're a baby if it's going to get the desired result. But if I say mama and then the mama turns, oh, okay, memory bank, put that one down. Oh, and say a couple more times, daddy don't turn, only mommy turns. Okay, got that one down. And so it's the same idea when we are praying, when we're learning any kind of tool, spiritual or otherwise, we begin to use it and elevate. And then at some point, we graduate from the training wheels of this thing, and then we get into the real riding, right? We start mountain
Right.
biking, or we start road racing, or all these different expanded ideas of what this thing called prayer is and can do, and then it just elevates from there as we practice.
Yep. I always loved to watch that. I've loved that over 20 years now, and I realized I am at pretty much 20 years of Science of Mind. It was the first or the second week in August in 2001 that my now wife and I walked into a Science of Mind, what was then a religious science church, the Church of Religious Science. And over that time, we have volumes and volumes of evidence that of where this has worked in our lives. And truthfully, I can point to volumes of evidence where I doubted myself. I won't do that here on in public for everybody to see. But catch me privately, and maybe you'll hear one of those stories one day. But we have evidence, mountains of evidence of where my own disbelief, my own doubt in this, and I guess that's God saying, "Yeah, don't tell that story whatsoever." God's little buzzer was a moment late there today, uh, but we have all of this. Also, more importantly, that says, okay, when we are in this place of trust, when we are in this place of faith, then we really can move beyond just the princes, the houses, the relationship, the money, the parking spot, the material stuff. and we start to move into a place where we open to a greater picture of what we can do through the power of this thing called spiritual mind treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where it gets a little tricky, right, Z? Because this is where people generally graduate into what we call practitioner training.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we learn how to use this, and we learn to use it for ourselves, and then it's a real easy step to say, I want to use this for everybody else around me.
Right.
And I want to free you from all of your ailments through this mighty power we have.
And you know, once you begin to practice the skill, it's like the Bible verse where two or more are gathered. God says, know that I am in the center, and the power has just been amplified when we're praying for things. And if we go back again to some of the original physical documentation of this stuff, if we go back and look at the What the Bleep movie, and we look at the whole experiment documented, with they had a group of meditators meditating that they could meditate and reduce the percentage of crime in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
By statistical measure. And they did it. I forget the name of the study, but they were able to amass a few people, I'm not sure the number, that you can look up the Washington, D.C. crime meditation study. I think it should come up. But it shows statistically that if this is done right, with the right intent and with the right people who are skilled and focused on doing it, it has an effect.
Yes. Yes. Collective meditation. And this is probably the most famous and the most verified study. And I'll go grab that link before we're done here today for everybody, because it's a direct proof. And it comes from, again, this is in the beginning of the Science Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes writes that we all look forward to the day when faith and spirituality and science meet, when the nexus of where they come together. We've passed that point. That's already happened.
Yes.
And much of what we're sharing today was at that point where scientists, verified lifelong scientists, were starting to say, and you know, folks, there's this thing called God or the bleep or whatever it is that you want to call it. And what was so wonderful as a religious scientist at that time was to watch all these scientists coming more towards the spiritual side and saying, hey, here's the proof you guys have all been looking for. Yeah. And we were able to now look to point to that. It's fun because we were in the process of really demonstrating. Now, not that we're not today, right? We're still demonstrating today, but we're demonstrating in a different way today.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, as Rev Z was talking about, we learn in the early stages of this of how to get my needs met in order to move out into the world and perhaps support others. And this is where we want to bring in a philosophical model. There are countless people on the internet that have hour-long courses on this, and the originator of this idea has hour-long courses on the internet and on all of this. But somewhere along the line, both Z and I got introduced to this thing called the 4 stages of spiritual growth, and also known as the 4 kingdoms of consciousness, 4 stages of spiritual consciousness, other names. Best I know, brought forth by Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith of the Agape International Spiritual Center. You see the 4 stones: to me, by me, through me, and as me. And we come into this philosophy generally from a perspective of life is happening to me. I'm the victim, and all this stuff is raining down meatballs on my life. Mm-hmm. But spiritual mind treatment and hanging out around this philosophy for even a moment or two wakes us up that it says, wait a minute, no. I have the ability to direct this energy, and so life is really happening by my command. that to me, Z, is in many ways like right in alignment with almost every other form of prayer I've ever known out there.
Without a doubt.
We're not that different at that
No,
moment.
and that's where we get into the prayers of petitioning and the prayers of intercession and the prayers of well, beseeching and petition are the same thing, but because we go through these evolutionary stages of growth, you know, as there's the verse that says, "As a child, I thought of the child and played as a child, and when I became an adult, I put aside childish things." Now, you know, I had somebody say, "Well, it says you go to the child, only children can get into heaven." Well, that's about a mentality. That's not about an actual learning process. And so, what we're talking about now is the learning process of when you come to first grade, they don't give you calculus. They give you basic 1 apple plus 1 apple is 2 apples. And they give you physical things. And then they move to go to algebra and they start doing abstracts. They take an apple away and put an X there. And then they progress into all these functions and stuff when you get into geometry and calculus. And that's what we're talking about here, this progression of how we learn to pray, learn the elements of prayer, how to use it. And then we can begin to go, as we do with calculus and geometry and all those things, we can go abstract. We can start imagining things and praying into spaces that we only have angles and heights and space and width that we can now fill a container with the word of God.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I only passed any of those classes because of prayer. I didn't know it at the time. I had no clue. I had no idea how to do the equation. I had no idea. I definitely wasn't praying to Jesus or anything, but I just kind of would sit there and give it all up and say, okay, maybe that's it. And somehow they let me go to the next course. I don't know. but we do, right? We have to take those steps. We have to move. You cannot jump to the end. And right now, my wife and I were going through. Our eldest is learning how to drive, and is not at all aggressive about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a newer degree of patience. That, well, in my mind, I would really love to skip to the end. I'd love to skip 3-4 steps ahead and get you into something with a stick shift and teach you how to drive a clutch and the whole 9 yards. That's a ways down the road. If I try to do all that all at once, no. Going back to the park, we're going to go to a parking lot. We're going to stop at a parking spot. We're going to learn how to pull out and turn left. Yeah. We're going to do that 10, 20, 30 times, right? Whatever it is to get the experience that we need. Because it all comes back to how many times have I proven to myself I can do this?
And the interesting thing about that metaphor is, for me, is that you have one expectation of how fast this should happen, how aggressive she should be moving toward it, or he should be moving toward it. I'm thinking about my own daughter because she didn't want to do it. And then all of a sudden, I got to do it. And then she moved right into it. And I'm thinking, you're thinking the same thing with your oldest, that as it become more important, the practice will become more, the putting the hours in, the logging the hours and all of that stuff. Again, it sounds like a laboratory experiment, which is what you have to do in Colorado. You have to drive, you have to log the hours, you have to show that you've done it. And the expectations of parent and child are different.
Yes.
I have a friend whose son just turned 21 and he's 20 and he's just now thinking about getting his license.
Oh, wow. Right on.
Wasn't important before.
Yep. And, interestingly enough, I just saw a post by a distant colleague, a couple of times removed type of colleague that maybe 10, 15 years older than me, and just said, I will never buy another car again. I have alternative transportation. I live in a close enough to a city that there is public transportation and electric bicycles, and I'll never have to buy another car. Whole new perspective, right?
Yeah.
So we keep building upon these perspectives through this repeated experience of proving our prayers. And it brings us to a place where we start to realize that it isn't even really me that's doing all this directing,
Right.
but I'm a vessel through which, and remember, this is our third step, our third kingdom, where life is where I realize it's more happening through me.
Yes. Yes. And that
So,
no, because now you got me on the drive, and it goes back to my daughter, because the last time we spoke, she says, I want to learn, and she's in her almost mid-20s now. She says, I want to learn how to drive a stick shift, right? That's she threw me off, because that I literally just had that conversation. And so she's saying, I got the basic skills, I know how to make the left turns, the parking, but now I want to go to another level of driving where it's through me. I have to shift these gears. I need to know when to put it in the first or bring it to second or whatever it is. And it's the same application in life and in prayer.
Yes. Yes. And the next thing you know, she's going to come home and say, Dad, I want to learn how to drive race cars.
Yeah. Woo. I hope she calls somebody else on that one.
Okay. Yeah, that's one. Hey, Dad, guess what I did last weekend? What? I learned how to drive race cars. Okay,
yes.
Good. You did it. Yeah, you survived. Good. Thank you.
Yes.
So here we are in this place, folks, where now we're awakening to the fact that the power is moving through me, and we truly are a servant of the experience of the evolution of humanity's revelation of just being life in this planet, and again, the prayer changes.
Yes.
The experience of it changes.
And also, maybe the tools or experiences or practices that you need to get to that level may change. Because I'm going to stick with this car thing. I actually tried when my daughter was here a few weeks ago for my birthday, a week or so ago. I actually tried to find a rental car with a stick shift and could not find it. So there's a tool there that she needs now to be able to learn to drive this car manual stick shift, but I don't have the tool, i.e. a manual shift car, to allow her to train and learn.
I just saw, a whole new cottage industry for dating. Who's got need to borrow a stick shift for an hour? Need to borrow an older vehicle with a stick shift for an hour, because I think it costs a lot of money to get a stick shift these days.
Yes, they are racing cars.
Yes, and that's let's stay on this racing car thing, because in real life, just like in vehicles, you're not going to spend every day in the same vehicle, and some days are going to be different. You're going to move through these stages of consciousness, and some days, it's going to feel like life is dumping all over me. And every time I try, me and I don't even want to say it, but my computer and I today have been having a tough relationship. I didn't say that, honey, I swear. And some days it's going to feel like that, and that's when we got to lean back into the practice.
Yes.
You will find people watching this program, you will spend most of your time moving through these places of being both by me and through me. This is where it feels like I'm in the flow, where all the drummers are aligned, and boy, are we just, ooh, and the vibration takes us to another level of experience. That
And the interesting piece there, something we talk about all the time, which is this whole idea of a circle or a spiral of life. And so the 4 stages of growth will happen over and over and over again because you're spiraling. And sometimes you stay in one revolution, or the movement from one revolution to the next is so small, you may not necessarily notice the gain or the knowledge or wisdom or practice, or pick one of those things that you're working on when it happens. But it does happen. And as you continue to spiral, you may think it's happening to me again, it's happening to me again. Mm-hmm. But at some point, when you get to that point, you recognize that it's going to always happen to you as you get to another level. But you're now equipped with the skills and tools and perception to say, oh, I've been here before. I know what needs to happen. Change my focus, change my thinking, make a prayer, do a dance, sing a song, whatever that thing is to elevate you out that level of consciousness to move to the next level.
Yep, exactly. We graduate from making nothing but left turns to making both left and right turns. And we graduate from making just left turns at high speed on a high-speed oval to making left turns and right turns on a Formula One track. And utilizing more of the skills in various ways and in various aspects.
And you know, the funny thing about that is I lived in Australia for a little while, and you know, the steering wheel is on the other side from where we are. And for the longest, to go left, I did a right, and went left because I was so afraid to go left. Especially with the wheel on the other side, you know, it was just a whole nother way of thinking.
I turned into the inside lane, right? Yeah, it would. I could. I could just. My mind right now is like, nope.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but I figured it out. I did it was happening to me for a while, and I had to do all these right turns to get left, but eventually I understood, I got in the flow, and I made the left turn. And after that, made that first 2 or 3 left turns. Then I was off to the races.
Yep. And it again comes back to the practice. You're reminding me of another great video I've seen, and it's the backwards bicycle. And there's videos out on YouTube and stuff, and a guy built a backwards bicycle.
Wow.
Now, we've all like this it shows us the deep programming, because he would find people and be like, do you ride bicycles? And people would be like, no. Because how long has it been since you've been on a bicycle? Oh, so long. Okay, so you know how, but if I gave you a bicycle, you could ride yes. And they put the person on the bicycle and they can ride, no problem, right? We expect this. This is the deep programming. Fun part comes with then he gives them a bicycle that's backwards in its steering. So obviously the first few attempts go horribly.
Yes.
And that is the same whether he gives the bicycle to somebody off the street or if he gives it to a professional rider.
Yeah.
So he gives it to somebody that rides professional mountain bike, and that guy's all cocky, and of course I could do this. It's just a bicycle, and he can't do it either. And both people are able to relearn in a relatively short amount of time to see some success.
Yeah.
Now, if you ride that bicycle once, you're only going to have so much success. If you ride that bicycle 2 days in a row, you're going to see more 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row. This is why we promote all the various spiritual practices that we talk about on this program and others on a daily basis.
Yeah. And ergo the statement, success breeds success, right? The more success you had, it breeds success, and it begins to operate in other parts of your life as well, because you have that vibrational placeholder of what success feels like, what your mind is doing when I'm successful, what kind of sensations I get in my body when I'm being successful, what kind of smells even do I smell when I'm in the throes of success versus non-success, right? So we begin to tap into this wholeness. This is a whole body experience that makes it work. And when we can find those places that we can put in our logbook, we're going to be in good shape.
Yep. Now, here's the other fun part of that story. Imagine what happens after a few hours of getting good at one way, at the backwards way. Then they put them back on a regular bike. And that's the place where you would anticipate, yeah, no problem, switch right back. Nope. Their next couple of rides are all over the place because they've now reprogrammed. And we've got to go back and forth, and we're going to go back and readjust what we're doing to get different results.
And you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of those. There's a name for the pictures, and I forget what that technical name is, but it's those pictures where you can see two or more images in one picture if you look at it from a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
So for some groups, they see one side, the other group sees the other side, some group sees both sides at the same time. And given a little time, those who could only see one perspective, after a few tries, they too can see all perspectives at once by allowing themselves to go out of focus, to be more open, more surrendered, and not lock into the programming. And I would imagine as the bikers went back and forth, they began to open up to a bigger experience of life, a big experience of riding the bike, if you will, and said, I got it now. And that's what we're trying to do every day with these spiritual practices.
Exactly. And that's where we come to the ASME stage. Right? So at that certain point, it isn't even more than I'm just open to whatever's going to happen. It's I'm here and fully present to be whatever needs to be so that what wants to be will be.
Yes. Yes.
One of my early teachers, when I asked, what is your spiritual practice, would say, whatever's in front of me. And I've shared this story, I think, with you before, that for the longest time, I thought that was the biggest cop-out in the world.
Yeah.
Eventually, I grew into an understanding and a perspective that, no, wait, hold on. If I truly am in that place where life is just happening as me, then I have no need to resist. I have no need to control. I have no need to push or shove or cajole anything.
Yeah.
But I absolutely have to be willing to do what shows up in front of me.
Right. Yeah. Right. And Ernest has a statement, says something that, when you step into that flow, you know what to do, when to do, and how to do it. Because it's there. We just have to stay synced into the idea of who and what we are, which is a manifestation of the divine mind of God that flows through us. And when we open up to that, that's when we have those intuitive moments. That's when we have those deja vu moments. I've done this before, and you just go right to it. Because we're at that point, we're stepping into this broader spectrum, a broader aspect of ourselves, and allowing the Spirit of God to move through us and be as us.
Somebody asks you, what are you doing? I don't know. What are you trying to, how do you know it's going to work? I don't know. But this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to try it. This is where we're going to go. This is the experiment.
Yes.
To say, and if it doesn't work, hey, that's great information as well. Cool. Yeah. Let's try the next step.
And we really, for example, so I had this task at work, and I got sidetracked by a million other things. And then when I figured out, sugar honey iced tea, I did not do that thing, and that thing is about to expire. And so I don't, and I'm thinking, well, I'm within hours of this thing to being done, and it's not going to work. But I said, what the heck? Let me just send the email and say ABC and see what happens. Sent the thing, and no worries. We'll schedule a meeting tomorrow. We'll reconfigure. We'll figure it out, and then we can fly from there. Now, had I stayed in my normal level of consciousness at that hour, given my mistake for not being more attentive, I could have got on my stuff, and the world is happening to me, and went down that whole path and truly missed the opportunity. But because I stayed in the moment and said, well, something's coming through, boom, something as simple as an email to say, hey, I got tied up. And just being honest, I just totally missed the boat, got tied up. A prayer was answered in that moment.
Right. Yep. Being willing to know that there can be a greater expression, a greater resolution to what I perceive as a problem. Yeah. And that would always flourish me when it's like, I think I've got all the answers and this is going to be a problem. And then all of a sudden I realize, no, nobody else is worried about it. It's not a problem. It's only a problem in my mind because I made it one.
Right.
So, okay, cool. Let's have that meeting tomorrow. And, tell me the answer didn't come in the middle of the night as an epiphany or that morning in the shower. The answer, here's what I need to say in the meeting. And that sparks the perfect resolution too.
Yep.
That's the ASME, folks. That's living in the place of true, absolute trust and faith that whatever's in front of me is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And I love this. I love this idea that I got from Stephen Covey in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He had this idea in his planning system, and I'm trying to incorporate it more. I've used it in my corporate life, but I'm trying to put it more into my spiritual life. Whereas he had this idea that we have these different roles, and within these different roles, you should plan by the week and not by the day. Because if you plan by the day, you're already in crisis. There's going to always be more things in a day that you can get done. Right. But if I plan by the week, so to speak, i.e., I have a vision, I have some goals, and I can begin to parcel out time and everything to relate to that. Now we can be a little more effective. Now I can use my time a little more wisely, and I don't have to find myself in those panicky moments. And then I take notes again. I keep track. That didn't work. This worked. That kind of worked. And now we become the religious scientists of how we navigate life and how we proceed using these spiritual tools of prayer, contemplation, meditation, song, dance. Pick something that works for you, because everything doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
And then we're good.
And then we're good. Exactly. I want to thank you. You used the term religious scientist again. And I think that's very important. That's a term that in many ways has gotten thrown out with the bathwater from my perspective. But it really does speak to the fact that we are taking, all right, perhaps not a rigorous double-blind study, peer-reviewed scientific approach to this, but we are taking a personalized scientific approach to the experiment of what works in our lives and what doesn't.
Yes.
And we've learned over time that there are things that appear to work and perhaps even do work for a season or of our lifetime, but not forever. Whether that's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether it's a healthcare regimen, whether it's a supplement, whether it's what you put in your green tea in the morning or your smoothie at lunch, right? And we are each on this evolutionary journey to keep growing into what's new, to keep growing into what's calling us to something new. Yeah. And in many ways, that's what this program's all about, is looking at how this new thought philosophy can support us along that journey, whatever that is for you.
And for some strange reason, you made me go to this idea of the second law of thermodynamics and entropy, that, all things go through entropy, and they come from one state and they go down to another state. And at each level of that entropy, there's another set of laws at these different stages that take effect and have to be worked with. When you talk about what's in my smoothie, well, what I had in my smoothie, 10 years ago ain't the same as in my smoothie. Same thing for vitamins and so forth. And so it's the same thing with prayer, not so much in what we pray for. I looked at it in terms of, how do I put myself in the right framework physically, mentally, emotionally, so that when I pour into the spiritual idea, it affects me, its effects are felt more than previously. It's like swimming in an ocean and swimming in a lake, right? I'm still swimming, but in the lake, I don't have these waves and stuff that's pounding me as I try to go in from the surf. Right in the lake, I just jump in and we good to go. But if I'm swimming in the ocean, I got to walk through the waves and the tides rolling back in. Whole different set of skills needed there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think we just came across a whole great talk title: the second law of thermodynamics applied to spiritual mind treatment.
Yes.
Maybe we'll bring that into one of the Saturday
Yes.
lecture series for
Yes.
next year, maybe.
That would be a good one.
But that's a great point, right? If I don't keep my practice going, if I'm not true to my practice daily, every day, the practice entrophies. And the more I allow that entropy to happen, then the harder it is to get enough impulse behind it to get it back into orbit,
Yes.
to get back up to that place of being in the knowing, of being in the constant place of saying, yeah, I see how this works. And and let's work it, right? I see how it works, so let's work it.
And the key thing for me that you just sparked, I mean, it just dropped in like an anchor. This is not about competition, right? Because a lot of us let the thing entropy, and then we start comparing ourselves to someone else and try to get back up. Whereas if we would have stayed on purpose and on point in the first place, my friend used to always say, what hit us couldn't have missed us, and what missed us couldn't have hit us. And it's the same kind of concept that we have to begin to not focus on ourselves in a selfish way, but focus on ourselves in a way that says, I have something to bring, I have a set of skills, whatever, that I need to hone and do it. Whether it gives me the same results as Robert, or Robert's the difference from James, or whatever, doesn't matter. Because when I get in my sweet spot, anything and everything I need will come to me. As the song goes, everything is coming to me easily and effortlessly once I put myself in that frame of reference. Other than that, it might be happening to me.
Well, folks, here we are to continue our analogy. I think we're about to put it into third gear. We got a whole other hour in front of us, but that's not how this show is programmed.
Yeah.
This show is programmed for 1 hour, and I love that that we find that rhythm in some way every time we sit down to be in communication and relationship with the divine. What we've been talking about here today is really strengthening that relationship where we become vessels of truth. And it takes some effort, and it takes some practice, and it doesn't take a lot of effort or a lot of practice. It just takes dedicated effort, dedicated practice, committed to the revelation of it all. So we want to thank you for being with us, folks. We're about to run overtime, and one of our practices is to not do that so much. So Z, before we go, final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to mention that I did put in the chat a link to that study from Washington, D.C. that happened in 1994.
Yes.
So please do that. And as always, practice, practice, practice.
Practice, practice, practice. I'm Rev Briz on behalf of my dear friend Rev Z here. This is the New Thought Media Network. This is New Thought Today. We'll be back next Tuesday. And next Tuesday, Z, I don't know who yet, but I'm going to be live on location at the Big Sky Retreat in Big Sky, Montana. And I'm going to corral somebody else that's hanging out around there to join me in my field studio. Get you to come in on the other side. We'll have a big old conversation next week live from Big Sky as well.
I'm loving it already.
It's going to be a good time. We do want to say a quick thank you to the Hefferland Foundation for their financial support that's going to make all that happen, and their support of giving us and donating to us that mobile studio that you'll get to start experiencing here soon. All right, we're out of here for now. Until next time, peace.
Peace.